2018.
Yeah, in your packet is the board minutes from the January 22nd. Angela, as the Assistant Secretary, prepares those and is prepared to answer any questions.
I move to accept the minutes as written.
A second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. All right, now financial summary.
Yeah, so this is the financial summary for January 2018, and we have made a couple of changes according to request from the board. As you see here in January, revenue of $198,000, expenses of $139,000, with a variance in the positive direction of $58,000. We're tracking along very well in revenue versus expenses in the overall fund performance. The revenue analysis, tracking at 176 was the forecast 198. Looking at where we're at for the year, we're 18,000 positive through this part of the year. Looking at the expenditures, this is where we've added the forecast for year to date. At 464 is the total against the actual, which is 434, with a variance of 30,000 under the forecast at the moment. This is one of the changes that Sam wanted to see so he could see where we're tracking at through the year, because there's some one-time expenses that hit in 1 month. The bonds for officers was brought up last month. That's paid all in one lump sum in the fall in a single month and not spread out over all 12 months. Looking at the capital outlay projects, this is another page that was added. When you look at the budget for each of the projects, the actual to date, and then the budget balance for the capital outlay projects. We're really just incurring some engineering expenses here now that we've hit the first of the year on these. We've encumbered all of those funds through a purchase order, so they're all tied up, but that's the actual outlay for all of those projects today. And then this is the fund balance page. We don't have the audit yet, so it hasn't been updated to reflect the audit balances, but as soon as that's ready, we will have Tracy Waldron come in and we will present the audit to the board, and then this page will get updated, and then this is the debt obligation chart of where we're at and when our current debt load in FY33 gets paid off. Any questions on the financial statements? We didn't see any irregularities in the financial statement in the payables.
Make a motion to accept the financials.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion to accept the financial statements as read. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Sam, thank you. So I just wanted to tell you thank you for making input, and thank you, Sean, for responding to that.
Yeah, I do like the new format.
Tracy Waldron is responsible for putting all that together.
All right, now we'll go to 3.3, consideration, discussion, and possible action regarding an update on 921 Main Street redevelopment, site remediation, pre-leasing activity, and possible extension of the letter of intent with Stone Cobalt LLC for a period of 120 days.
Yeah, we have two folks signed up to speak on this item, but Jean is going to come up and kind of walk y'all through the history of 921 as it relates to this item tonight. We really need to break this into two parts. One being the possible extension of the letter of intent with Stone Cobalt and the pre-leasing activity to date, and then visit separately, because concurrently with the next few months, we need to be looking at an interim site remediation plan. And we as staff want to make sure that the board understands that we're going to go expend some funds here to make sure that we've dotted our I's, crossed our T's, and we know where we're going with that interim site remediation plan based off the KSA report. If you read the memo, there has been some site condition changes related to that, and I'll kind of get into those once Jean is finished, and we're speaking specifically about the site remediation. So I'm going to let Jean come up, and she's going to present.
So Sean, the way it's presented on the agenda, it's okay to break it into 2 action items?
We don't need action on the site remediation. It's more for informational purposes of, hey, we need y'all to know that there's some changes that have occurred with the site, and we need to do some research into that and present the item to you as informational in sense that we need y'all to know that, hey, we're going to go expend some funds to make sure that we've dotted our I's, crossed our T's, and then we're going to come back with a full report in March.
Okay, so the way the agenda item is written, the only possible action that you're looking for is for the board to consider the extension of the 120
That
days?
is correct.
Okay.
That is why that is worded for the possible extension of the letter of intent.
Okay. When you said we need to break it into 2, I didn't know if that was
I
going to be
think
2 action items.
in visiting with the board today to clarify that the letter of intent and the extension is one item in the pre-leasing activity, and then the site remediation, we need to have a separate conversation about that because we just need direction as staff to bring back to y'all what you're looking for at the March meeting with the engineers, because the engineers need to go do some work.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Board. I have not used this one before, so please forgive me. Okay, so just to go backwards a little bit on the overview, I'll briefly cover that, but at the August 21st board meeting of last year, the EDC board did select Stone Cobalt Partners as the finalists for the 921 Main redevelopment project. After that, they provided a presentation at the October 16th board meeting. The board voted to authorize the EDC executive director to execute a letter of intent with Stone Cobalt Partners for the redevelopment of 921 Main. So let's just go through just a little bit of where we are and kind of how this all transpired. 2013, the city acquired the empty lot as a building, as the building was to be rebuilt. They did not do so, and so the EDC approached them about acquiring the land from the city of Bastrop in 2016. The continued deterioration has provided us kind of, an urgency in providing something back to the tenants that are on each side of that lot. So again, the letter of intent was we went through an RFQ process, and then the letter of intent was signed October 27th of 2017. We did a public input session for quite a while and engaged with the public about what would be the best use of that property. We also approached an engineering firm as well as the Texas Historical Commission about, evaluating what the best use of that property would be. So here is just some background on the remediation and possible future use of the property.
During the public input phase of this, the 2 park options were heavily favored prior to the EDC getting involved. And one of the things that we were asked to do by the board at the time was look at the ongoing maintenance and operation of a park in that facility from a programming aspect as well as maintaining it over the course of a lifetime. And when we looked at it over a 10-year maintenance and operation, it's adding $700,000 to $800,000 over a 10-year period to somebody's budget. And that's probably conservative. Those of us that have been real intimate with this project think it can be as high as $1 million over the 10-year period. Whatever, if those exterior walls of what is Relics and the 602 on Main remain exposed over a 10-year period, at some point the remediation that we do today, pointing up the brick and the mortar, is going to have to be redone. And so, and the cost related to that, although it's $100,000 in today to do site stabilization with the first option, 10 years from now, that cost may be $150,000 or $200,000 or even more to step in and go and do that. And even if it's one of the park options, that still is going to have to be done because those exterior walls that are exposed, that were never intended to be exposed, are still going to be exposed, and there's still going to be ongoing maintenance with those, as well as the programming of the space for utilization.
Yeah, the expense of repairing those walls that were never supposed to be exposed, that would fall to us?
Currently, it would, yes. And that was one of the things when the EDC accepted this project, that whatever the expense related to the remediation, we were accepting that responsibility from the city in accepting the site back in 2016.
I guess I'm wondering why it doesn't belong to the owners of the building.
So it's actually dates back to, and Charlie can correct me if I'm wrong, it dates back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, and basically barbed wire fences. Each building owner has their share of it, and so we have half a share on each wall. In Relix's case, they've invested some dollar amount to remediate the interior walls, which would be the exterior of 921 Main. Not so much at 602, but they've invested some dollars on their side as well. That is their share to that barbed wire fence, shared common wall. And that's part of the process as the building is getting built and designed. We have to go back to both of those owners with what that new wall design is going to look like, and there's going to be a legal document that has to be put in place. When you get up to that flash and cap, at what point does it become the neighbor's responsibility for everything below and on their side of that point, and what is 921 Main's point? But we can't get to that point until we actually have engineered drawings of what that parapet wall and that flashing cap up there looks like, and the height of those walls. And that document then, whatever is agreed on there, will need to be filed at the courthouse so that you can get actual notice whenever you're interested in purchasing either of those buildings, or as owner of that building, that document's filed at the courthouse of where that is.
Refresh our memories on the total amount that we have estimated that's going to cost.
So that is actually, back up to the first one. So currently when we did this estimate last year, depending upon if you remove the real wall at the site, it's $93,000 or $108,000 removing the wall. In the stone cobalt letter of intent, some, if not all, of this work will need to be done prior to them being able to go vertical with the site. And so they've actually asked for this amount as part of the final agreement. Anything that we might commit to doing interim remediation today would need to go back to Stone Cobalt as an offset against that future amount, because it's work that we would do in advance of them starting construction. Going in and pointing up all of the mortar through that section, they need to do that before they build their wall. And if we do it, they're just not going to get as much on the back side because that work will have been completed.
All right, and you stated earlier that now there's some new things that we need to take a look at that could impact that $93,000, and we're going to get to that?
Yeah, we'll get to that with that. It's kind of some of the post-Harvey stuff with that massive amounts of rainfall. We've seen the conditions change from when this study was originally done to today.
So just one more thing on that point. Stone Partners then would have to actually agree to the remediation plan to understand what is being done in order for them to agree that to the reduction of the
Yeah, they understand at this point that there needs to be an interim plan put in place, and we need to go through that process and look at what the current wall conditions are compared to when this estimate was done, and what remediation may need to be done in the interim before a building is built on that site. And that they understand that the wall conditions have changed.
Okay.
So this is a little bit of a breakdown of what the public input had provided through our timeline. And as we're all aware, we're at this point now to where we all feel that the best interest is to put an actual building back in that spot. We basically are at the point now where with the LOI, that went into place at the end of October, and so with that, then came the holidays. And we've really seen a big increase in interest and communication regarding that site as of the first part of January. So in conjunction with Stone Cobalt Partners and the EDC, we would like to ask if you all would be kind enough to provide an additional 120-day extension on the LOI to provide us a little bit more time to evaluate some potential very good options with that property, so we can hopefully get the project going at the same time we need to do the remediation. But that will come at a further conversation. So that's kind of where we are, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Yeah, what was the reason for the 120 versus 90 or 60?
Well, we just kind of feel at this point that would give us the opportunity to continue to work the office aspect of it as well, because we can't evaluate anything for the office without the lower retail portion. And so it would kind of come in conjunction with, and it just gives us a little bit more of an elongated opportunity to work both of those options, because they are very different.
But they have some opportunities that they're looking at, some
Yes.
pretty firm stuff.
We've got
the bottom.
some potential retail stuff for sure, and that will be the driver for the office stuff.
Okay, did Sean, you and your staff comply with number 6 of the LOI, the item number 6, which is basically that during the due diligence period, you get that all the information that they requested to do their due diligence was provided to them?
Correct. We have supplied them all the due diligence material that's available today.
Has there been any issues from their side on, in other words, is any of this extension have to do with any information that they either A, did not get, or they're still working on?
No, the extension really has to do with a timing issue with the letter of intent being signed at the end of October. Bob and his team, it took about 30 days, give or take, for them to ramp up the marketing, to get signage in place, to get out onto CoStar, to get marketing materials developed. And by the end of November, late part of November, we're into the Christmas holiday season, and their targets out there, that is their prime selling season for retail and restaurants out there. And it really wasn't until January 2nd that once the holiday season was over, that we really saw an interest in the property start come to the forefront. I know that we've had 2 site visits to Bastrop to look at it. I know that Gene and Sarah are planning to go visit with a merchant that has already made a site visit. And so we're seeing good pre-leasing activity since the first part of the year. And that 60-day window after January 1 just is not enough time for them to be successful when you go back and look at the calendar and go, oh, we probably should have been 180 days from October versus 120. And that was a Stone Cobalt request, was 120 days. We just didn't catch it as staff. And so we think 120 days right now is a reasonable approach. It's based in merit on what they'd previously requested. And we know that what we're in visiting with Bob, that we really have to have an LOI on the retail restaurant space downstairs so they can do a delivery target date when they start construction. And they suspect that based on where the market is at today, that there will be some interest in the office space in the private market. 4,500 square feet that's relatively accessible in downtown Bastrop. There's also some interest from some first floor tenants in taking part of the second floor as event space. And so that's going to be a driving factor. Is there truly 4,500 square feet on the second floor, or is it 2,500 or 3,000 square feet because there's event space on the second floor overlooking Main Street?
Again, that lower is going to be the driver for the upper, because it can be numerous different combinations, and so we've got to establish that definite for the lower portion of it to then go to the upper opportunity.
Okay, I have a question. So I know that you said that, it took them 30 days to get their marketing done, but this isn't their first time doing this, correct? So in the holidays, we all knew they're coming in December. So what I'm wondering is if they've done this before and the holidays we all know they're coming, why didn't we plan for this in the first place? So instead, you were saying they thought 120, 180, but now you're asking for another 120, not just another 60 days.
Sure. Well, like we've talked about before, in downtown Bastrop, it's a unique opportunity. And with it being 4,500 square feet, that's going to take a very special environment, whether it be a retail environment or a restaurant environment. And we have to evaluate and make sure that we're putting a tenant in there that is going to be a long-term tenant. Making sure that we pick the right company to go in there, and that takes time. Just like our bigger deals take time to recruit. Sometimes these, I'm sorry, yes, you do. I guess maybe they were being very hopeful that, they could do something quickly.
Yeah, I'm with Drew, and I'm really glad she said that, because I got a couple calls, the same thing, like, so who didn't realize on October 27th that Thanksgiving and Christmas was coming?
Sure.
So one question that I have, particularly to hear you say, well, in hindsight, because I'm putting words in your mouth, I think what you're saying is in hindsight, on October 27th, maybe you should have signed 180 days. And so for me, the math, that's pretty easy. Then the extension should be 60 days. And what I like about that is it keeps it current, and it's not 4 months before we hear from somebody again. And the thing that I would like to confirm is if we only do 60 days tonight, it allows us to reevaluate it, and it doesn't mean that we can't extend it another 15 or 20 or whatever. But of everything that you've said, and I know nobody is perfect, but I'm having a hard time really understanding what changed.
Sure.
So that's one option, if you would just extend it another 60 days instead of 120. Walk me through next steps if we don't want to renew.
Yeah, this has been the RFQ process from the time the board gave us directive to go out with an RFQ to selecting Stone Cobalt was about 6 months. The community has not had interest in the EDC stepping in and being self-developing the site. That has not, and that's always an option, but it has not had community or board support previously. Going back out for a second RFQ to see if there's any other interested developers. We're probably issuing the RFQ. It's probably a shorter period this time, probably 4 to 5 months to put it out onto the street, get responses back, evaluate them, bring them back to the board to make a decision and go back through the negotiation process. We know we have a qualified joint venture here with 2 developers that have a track record and a history of delivering high quality products. Whether or not they would respond to a second RFQ, I don't know the answer to that question. Whether there would be any additional responses to a second RFQ, I don't know the answer to that question. And so we run that risk. The other part of this is, then we're getting into doing the interim site remediation probably to a higher level of stabilizing the site. And so we're probably closer to that $100,000 mark of full stabilization of the site. And I can't tell you what the number is going to be until we engage the engineers and have KSA and BES back out to examine the site. But that's kind of the process moving forward. Is your options are self-develop, go back out for an RFQ, or do the extension with Stone Cobalt, knowing that they went through an RFQ process. They're a high quality, highly qualified developer that they can deliver a product.
Are they waiting for, I think at the end of October, we also talked about the parking situation, and somebody mentioned that there'd be some parking solutions brought forward in the next couple of months. Are they waiting for that as well? Are we waiting for that as well?
No, that'll be whatever the parking rules that the city of Bastrop has in place at the time that we do the performance agreement and they come down to make their application, or the parking rules that they're going to have to comply with. And under today's rules as they exist downtown, there would have to be some accommodation that the council would have to make in probably some kind of parking credits for future parking development, which there's some opportunity down there. But that's really a council issue that they're going to have to address through the building permit process, and that's been, to this point, been contemplated, but it could change. Sarah will tell you that her dream.
Well,
Sean and Jeaton do a great job of talking in economic development terms, and I speak a different language. I don't think that the holidays interfered with the work that Cobalt and Stone was doing. They had their work done and their marketing packages done on time. The issue is when you're looking for a retail client, they're not going to talk to you, they're not going to come visit with us until after the holidays. And so we didn't meet one-on-one with any of the interested potential tenants until after the holidays because of their own schedule. So I don't think it was a reflection of the firm for the timing schedule. So I just wanted to clarify that little tidbit.
All right, well then, yeah, I know we're going to hear some more here, but would it be, if they're asking for an additional extension on this thing, then what kind of, when are we going to meet with them next, or when are you guys actually going to meet with them next and talk about the importance, our concerns, what we have about pushing this thing out, if that's what we so decide to do, and what are they going to do to, you know what, get a couple of matches underneath the fire and get this thing going? Because obviously we want to see this thing become very successful, but we, you know, need to make sure that it is going to be done in a relatively short time span, right?
Yeah, we meet with their broker on a monthly basis to get an update of where the project is at. And so Bob Springer was out in January. We had a phone conversation in February with him. And so we're up getting updates from him on a monthly basis of what his activity level is. And then we're attending their meetings and site visits in between when they have folks in town. And so we're fully abreast of what their pre-leasing activity is, and we're actually satisfied that they're bringing folks to town that are taking a look at the building. And we're seeing an interest in other buildings as well. We're seeing foot traffic looking at some of the other vacant buildings downtown.
Well, and I'll say this too, you know, we've really seen a change in people very interested in our downtown. You know, part of it, I have to say, is part of the small business revolution concept. But a lot of it too is we're looking at our downtown differently, not only as an economic development, but also as a main street and as a community, because we're starting to get a lot of cohesiveness downtown. And that has a lot to do with our owners and business owners downtown. We've got a great downtown, and so it's all shifting, and I just think, you know, that this will be a good opportunity. And you guys obviously have input on the extension.
So did you say staff came up with 120 days, or Stone Cobalt asked?
I did not say that.
Who asked for 120?
So the original 120 was asked for by Stone Cobalt in their draft letter of
So, but I'm saying, who came up with the 120 that you're asking us for tonight?
We went with the 120 because it was 120, 120, 120 four times is
Okay,
360 days.
Well, I'm asking you,
That is correct,
it was
staff.
a staff, that didn't come from Stone Cobalt, that came from staff?
Correct.
So the truth is, they may be okay with 60 days. Have you discussed the length that they really needed, or you guys have just always discussed 120?
We've always discussed 120, and if the board decides on 60, they will accept whatever the board, the ultimate decision of the board, and they're prepared to come and address the board if y'all so wish to visit with them in the next 60 days.
I don't think that'd be a bad idea at some point, yeah, before we get to the end of the whatever extension, if we decide to do that.
Because the other part that I'm thinking is, there had to be a point, if the packages were ready but nobody wanted to talk to them, to me that also seems like that's not news to anybody that retailers are busy during the holiday season. But then if you didn't start getting information, it seems like, I don't know why we weren't talking about this in January, that we were going to need a request. And if we did and I've forgotten, I apologize, but I don't recall it being mentioned that we were in January that, hey, think we've gotten a late start or whatever. So that's kind of water under the bridge, but I'm having a hard time with 120 days, if you hadn't picked that up already. So, Catherine, I see your microphone's on. I wasn't trying to talk over you.
On item 7, we're not changing item 7 in the LOI. That's my understanding by the recommendation, the due diligence period. I'm trying to understand what that section 7 is, actually. It's a deadline, but
I believe number 7 talks about the deadline of the termination of the due diligence period, so instead of it being March the 1st, it would change just by whatever date. Is that correct, Sean?
I thought I saw something that said that that the LOI would not impact item 7. Maybe I misread something.
Mr. Zek, you got to get on a mic or no one can hear you.
Sorry.
Only Section 7 of the agreement will be affected. No other paragraphs will be. Okay.
And then, and I want the board to know, I asked Sean, because when I started reading through the LOI, because I know in October we authorized him to do one, but this is the first time, when it was in the packet, this is the first time I've seen it, for me personally. And I was concerned in Section 5 that it seemed as though we were going to make it BEDC offices, and I thought our direction had been for BEDC to be the backup. And Sean, you're telling me that is the intention, even though I'm not a lawyer, when I'm reading it, it sounds like it's going to be BEDC space, but you're saying the intention is for it to be retail or offices.
So the direction that was provided at the October meeting was for us to be offering the office space to the public for rent. What that section does is it sets should we step in through the performance agreement and a lease option, it negotiates our rate. And if you'll notice in the offering document to the street from REOC, it's a different price per square foot than what the EDC if we step in to lease the second floor. And so that sets our rate and our terms moving forward, that we're getting a preferred rate versus what's being offered on the public street, in the public offering.
So where in the LOI does it let me know that y'all are the backup plan and not the intended plan? Because it says within the office commitment as noted above, and it goes on to speak about BEDC.
Why is my document not full? No, I've got one.
And Ron, you seem to be more familiar with these, so chime in if I'm wrong.
I'm going to share the same as you did. This is the first time that I have seen this also, and you're right. While we did discuss that openly, I do not see it here in this agreement, and in fact, it doesn't actually say that in this letter. I mean, it can be an intent, one thing, but when you read it for the first time, it's a little difficult to gather that intent.
Right, that was the intent that was discussed.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Right.
And we
But it
talked
needs to be
about
in
that
writing.
in our subcommittee. That was the intent as well. In fact, I brought that up pretty strongly, that let's make sure that the public, gets
Right,
the
but it
first
needs
shot
to-
at this.
That's right, it needs to be written somewhere.
So it's on their letterhead. Did Stone Cobalt write the LOI?
Stone Cobalt drafted the original LOI, and then Denton Navarro, based on the board direction, modified it based on that, which then authorized me to sign it. Because if you go back and look at the original motion, it was instructing, and I don't have it in front of me exactly, but it was instructing legal counsel based on the business terms discussed in executive session to prepare an LOI for the executive director to execute.
Okay. So, Mr. Zek, are you going to rescue Sean? Or do you feel like it's stated that it's not the intent? Because it seems to me if we're going to extend it, this is a good time to clarify it, if it indeed needs clarification. Yeah, I don't think everybody, he's saying, can we give him a second
Yeah,
to
we'd
look
like
at
to-
it and go on to something else?
Right. Yeah, Mr. Zek would like a chance to look that over a little bit, and in the meantime, I'd like to get our public comments. Bonnie Coffee?
Thank you. Let me begin by saying that if you will look at the memorandum, the agenda memorandum of August 21, 2017, is where I actually found where Stone Cobalt Partners has studied the market. We plan on working hand in hand with the EDC and have studied a number of different tenant uses, and at this time expect to talk with the EDC, DMO, Main Street, and/or possible other public organizations about being tenants on the second floor. So that's probably where we all got that information, or that idea that it was going to happen. I want to begin by telling you that I just consider myself an average citizen with an above-average curiosity level. So there were several things in this discussion in this short time has been very helpful for me because I had questions. One of the questions is that because in a previous lifetime, one of my jobs was to vet vendors. And so when I saw the Stone Cobalt LLC, I began vetting the vendor and could not find any Stone Cobalt LLC listed. They're not listed with the comptrollers where they're taxable entity. Now, in reading all of this, it is my understanding that it's going to be a development organization which will be put together at a later date. But I'm telling you, as a plain old citizen, it looks, and they're signing everything Stone Cobalt LLC, which makes it twice as confusing for those of us who are not in the economic development world to understand that they're not there yet. So that was confusing for us. I appreciate the information on the remediation. My question is, Mama always told me to always have a plan B. So my question is, what happens at the end of this 120 days and then we get a performance agreement and nothing happens? I don't know whether there's a deadline involved in all of this. I don't know what happens when there is a deadline. And I hope that what happens if the project can't be sold and we have no tenants. I know we all hope we will, but I always want to have a plan B, and I'm not sure we have a plan B on what's going to happen if this doesn't all come together. And we've still got this empty lot that we had this huge community angst about what we were going to do with it. And now that we're going to move forward this way, I would like to have some sort of reassurance that we are headed in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Moore?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all. I agree with Bonnie that some of my questions have been answered by this discussion. But one thing that makes me wonder is with the price point on the price per square foot for the rental, when we have so many nice buildings that are vacant right now, what's going to be the draw to 921 Main when you can rent some nice spaces a lot cheaper? And anybody that knows me has heard me speak about 921 know that I was the one that wanted a gathering space. Because when the Downtown Business Alliance had leased that space, we had something there monthly, sometimes weekly. We had high school kids that came and did a play. We had chorales that sang there. We had Lakota Indian dancers. And the Main Street Design Committee came up with several studies we had on what we could do to not make it a pocket park, but a public gathering space with minimal maintenance. One thing we could do is get charged for some of these. And there were ways that we were looking at to offset the maintenance cost. But it became quite obvious that people wanted some folks wanted a building there. And so the discussions kind of died off. Then I'll close but I hope that if there is no plan B, or even if there's still this plan A, that you not overlook the gem that we have. We've had Main Street managers from other parts of the state come in here and tell us what a gem that is to have an open gathering space on a main street like this. When the folks came and studied it, they wanted a gathering space they want some gathering space, preferably the river, but that's going to be difficult. 921 was pointed out as the place to be. And I'll close by saying there's been a building on this site 3 times. 3 times it's burned. God don't want a roof over 921 Main. We need a gathering space. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further, oh, Mr. Zach, have you, you still need a little more time, or?
Get a mic, please.
So the first thing to keep in mind is this letter of intent is not binding on anybody. And so regardless of what the document says, everybody's can agree to whatever they'd like to agree to once we get into, if we get there, into the negotiation of a performance agreement, which will have to be done. And it's where those details that were spoke about earlier by the previous speaker will be fleshed out. There's no sense, in my opinion, spending legal dollars on drafting an agreement that may not even get entered into. So this letter of intent is the first step in getting to that. So to the extent the board would like to clarify those section a little bit, certainly it's within your prerogative to do so. From a legal perspective, it's not necessary to do so. The letter of intent is non-binding on either parties, and therefore we can accomplish whatever we'd like to accomplish. I hope that answers your question.
So Sean, you're confident that they know that BEDC is the backup plan?
Yes, and that's why you see it in the offering document for all 9,000 square feet to the public. Any private tenant that would want to lease the building, whether it be a portion or all of it, it's available to them. Now and into the future, as we get into the performance agreement, once they've leased the downstairs or have a letter of intent on the downstairs, they actually can't lease it because they don't have control of it. Once they get to that point and we're negotiating the performance agreement, there'll be components of that those details have to be memorialized in writing in a legal document. So I think it's clearly understood by their leasing agent. I think it's clearly understood by Stone Cobalt. And I think it's clearly understood by staff, the direction the board provided us.
Okay, thank you. And I would just want to make one comment to what Ms. Coffey said. Personally, I'm completely comfortable with Stone Cobalt LLC. They were very clear when they responded that they had pulled together a group of people that specifically for this project. So I realize that not everyone was privy to the entire conversation or may have had a chance to go back and review the tape or anything, but of the things that we've talked about, I feel like they were very clear that this was a new partnership and that they had specifically pulled people together. So as far as that comment.
Any further discussion on the extension?
You know, one thing we may want to consider is that while we're looking at 60 or 120 days, why don't we just go with the 90 days on it, and at least that gives them some more time, and it's not push it out too awful far. It's kind of a, somewhere in between, so to speak. So just something to consider.
And maybe have them come and see us at 60 days?
I would definitely like to have them
Yeah.
come and see us and give us an update on how things are going and make sure that we hear it with our own ears, that they understand our position of us being the option B, so to speak, of the office space and whatnot, okay?
I think what I'd like to do is motion that we give them a 60-day extension with an option of another 60-day when they come back to us in 60 days to tell us how they are. I mean, if they're doing well in 60 days, we're going to feel comfortable with offering them the second 60 days. But that way, we're only 60 days out to find out whether it's a
And if they don't have
yay or
anything
nay.
by the May EDC
And that will
meeting,
all-
they're on the agenda?
right, and that'll also give 60 days to Sean to come up with a Plan B, or 30 days.
I don't want to get too far into the weeds here. As far as I'm concerned, and maybe I'm wrong here, but the office space for the EDC is the Plan B. It's not the Plan A. So we don't really, this is not a discussion of a Plan B necessarily.
Oh, no, I meant for the whole space, not just the second story. I meant for the
She
whole.
meant if Stone Cobalt says, hands up, we're walking away from the LOI, that's the
what I
Plan
mean.
B she's
I mean,
talking
a
about.
whole Plan B for 921, not just
Gotcha,
the second story.
No, that's true. And I don't have a problem with that 60-day, and then let's take a pulse, and then another 60 days. I mean, that would be acceptable to me.
So what I'm hearing from the board, just to be clear, to make sure that the non-binding letter of intent reflects this, is y'all are will consider a 60-day extension, and we're really looking at an April meeting with Stone Cobalt coming and presenting a full update of where they're at, including their pre-leasing activities, and would consider another 60 days at that time.
Or 30, or whatever they need. So what I'm hearing is, and I believe the way 3.3 is worded, we can, and in fact, I'm even okay with making the motion that we extend the current LOI for 60 days, that our expectation is that they come back no later than so would that be April meeting? And if they want to come in March and tell us they've got a done deal, that would be good too. But that they come no later than the April meeting, and then at the April meeting, we discuss whether or not, why they need an extension, how long they need an extension, and we have a discussion with them, is my motion.
Okay, I think Ms. Rogers was first, and...
Oh, it's all right. I'll take hers, that's fine.
Is that okay?
That's exactly
Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to maintain Robert's rules as much as possible.
A second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second from Connie that we extend 60 days. Let me just make sure I'm understanding. Extend 60 days, and do we need to even have and invite them to come in April or earlier to present to the board their progress to date?
And it seems like Gene's wanting us to, we're not opposed to giving them another extension if they can justify why they need one. So I don't want them to, we're not trying to draw the line on the sand. We're all on the same team. We want them to be successful. So that, yes, 60 days, come in April. That's why I think that's the poignant points.
Okay, is everybody clear on the motion? All right, in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Sorry for making that more difficult than it needed to be. So the other part of this is the Plan B, as y'all were talking about. We did not budget in FY18 any 921 money pending the RFQ and what we're doing with Stone Cobalt. We have some general engineering money available within our budget, and what I do believe at this moment that Plan B needs to be, we need to have KSA and then building envelope systems specialists come out and examine the current conditions, because when you go down there and you look at the site and you visit with the neighbors, the exterior wall conditions post-Harvey have changed dramatically. And you can see it, especially on the relic side, the amount of paint that has come off the walls. And I don't need a motion or action from the board. This is really a informational. Between now and March, we're going to have KSA, we're going to have their building envelope specialists come out and reevaluate the site based on this criteria, which is the stabilization of the site, is the best way to term that, and come back to the board at the March meeting and give y'all an update of where the current site conditions are and what's changed since this was done, and if there's any interim steps that need to be taken in the next 30, 60, 90, 120 days from that meeting. And we'll have to go through the process of, if there is funds to be expended beyond the general engineering, we'll have to go through the budgetary process of making those funds available. But I didn't want this item to come on here and not give you a clear update on, yes, there's been some changes in the site conditions. It appears it was August of last year during Harvey with that heavy rainfall and wind over that extended period of time. And now that we've gotten into some additional rainy weather, we're hearing from the Smarzics, we've already heard from 602 previously, from Rayma Davis, that we need to take a look at this.
Does that change the status of Relic's claim? Didn't they put a claim on the city?
There's no claim on the EDC. So we've been working cooperatively.
I thought they were trying to make an insurance claim.
No, that was on the other side, and that was denied.
Okay.
Okay, and I've been to both places, and I can attest to the fact that things are changing. It's deteriorating. I mean, it's to be expected.
Well, and it also seems to me, had Stone Cobalt been successful, this is the very next step that we would be doing anyway, right? I mean, I think that's what you're...
Yeah. This is going to have to be done even if a building is built. All that mortar in there is going to have to be pointed up. All the missing bricks are going to have to be replaced before you can enclose that site. It's going to have to be done at some point, whether it's done pre-Stone Cobalt in construction or in an interim phase between now and construction starting. It's going to be done by somebody, whether it's the EDC or Stone Cobalt. And that's part of the LOI and part of their ask has been for this remediation to take place. They're willing to do it during construction, but I think we need to do it before then.
And just to be clear, we're paying for it either way, whether it's through a provision in the purchase contract or whether we do it ahead of time. It's a pay me now or pay me later thing, and I would much rather get the problem resolved so that we can stop causing pain to the neighbors and, make it right.
It's not getting any cheaper, and we need to be good neighbors,
Right.
to me.
Exactly.
It just needs to get done. Needs to get fixed.
And the recent weather has made it evident that we've got to step in here.
So,
So did you get what you needed?
I did. I didn't want to start spending general engineering funds and all of a sudden KSA show up next month going, oh, by the way, y'all need to invest $100,000 or $75,000 or $50,000 immediately and have that shock to y'all or the public.
All right, so I think we're ready to move on to 3.4. Consideration, discussion, and possible action regarding presentation from Jason Hughes, Hilltop Securities, and Kristen Savant, Norton Rose Fulbright, concerning the EDC's intent to issue debt in fiscal 2018 for the Agnes Street Extension Project and/or potentially the Technology Drive MLK Extension and Drainage Project.
So back last year during the budget process, the board hired Kristen Servant with Norton Rose as bond counsel and agreed Jason Hughes at Hilltop Securities. When we got to this point of talking about a debt issuance would be the folks that we were going to use. Y'all have not met them. They are new to the community of Bastrop and working on these types of projects. And so this is more of a meet and greet and walking through the available options. In your packet is the resolution, I believe it's 17, for the reimbursement resolution for both of these projects. In the FY18 budget, the board has contemplated the $1.2 million debt issuance for the Agnes Street extension, but the reimbursement resolution also covered Technology MLK, the extension and drainage project, for another 1.8. So what I asked Jason to do is to go through both of those, plus what I see is probably our maximum debt load that we could take on at $200,000. So he's going to provide you three options and kind of walk you through what the process looks like. We don't need a decision on this tonight because there's some other moving pieces that we're going to talk about in executive session to this. At the March meeting of the EDC, we need to have all of y'all's questions answered related to this so that you can make a decision. We're looking at probably an April issuance, a May issuance at the latest. April would probably be preferred, but this is just to give you a presentation from them and then to ask smart questions. I've got a couple of slides at the end to kind of update you on our debt service schedule and the public. And I went ahead late last week and went ahead and updated our sales tax rebate chart and added that in there today. It wasn't in your packet, but that also will kind of show you where the Buc-ee's agreement stands as well as the Burleson Crossing agreement. And both of those are large. I like to refer to them as unrecognized revenue because it's revenue that's coming in that we otherwise probably wouldn't be receiving. And at some point when those agreements expire, it's going to be recognized revenue because it's just a pass-through at the moment. Sam, if I'm not explaining that well in layman's terms, please speak up. At some point in the future, those are going to be revenue. So Jason Hughes and Kristen Servant.
Chairman, board members, good evening. Again, Jason Hughes with Hilltop Securities. It's good to be with you tonight. I'm going to cover three main items. I'm going to start out talking a little bit about your current debt load, then I'll transition over to the debt that Sean was just referencing, and then I'll end up with, if the board decides to move forward, some of the things that will be coming to you and asking you for your approval. So I'm very informal. Please stop me at any time if you have any kind of questions. So first, your existing debt, the corporation has one bond issue outstanding. As you can see, that's the Series 2006 bonds. You issued those just over a little over $2 million and now have about $165,000 left outstanding with the final maturity of 2020. And those were sold via private placement. Once I go to the next page, I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. The city actually issued certificates of obligation, general obligation refunding bonds as well, but they essentially did that on your behalf. So in other words, they went out, they sold their own debt into an interlocal agreement or some other kind of agreement with the corporation. The corporation turns around and repays that debt with your sales tax revenues. So as you can see there, a couple of COs, a little over $2.7 million, and then some GO refunding bonds. So they did a refinancing of existing debt last year. A portion of that was attributable to the EDC, and that's $500,000. Between those three, those have a final maturity of August of 2033. And as I said, all of that debt, again, listed there, in theory, is supported by EDC revenues. So let's talk a little bit about the potential bond issuance. And again, just to echo what Sean said, there's nothing that we are asking for your approval tonight. This, again, is just for your benefit. What I'm going to do on the next slide is review two debt issuances. As Sean said, the $1.2 million, which would be just Agnes, and then the combined $3 million, which would be Agnes as well as Technology Drive. So assuming that the board decides to move forward, if we get to the point where we're actually looking to issue bonds, what I would advise is we actually look at a private placement. Once again, this is exactly like what you did in 2006. And there's a couple of different ways. Let me kind of take a step back. A couple of different alternatives of how you can issue debt. One is you can issue via what's called the open market. And if we do that, we put together an offering document. We talk with the credit rating agencies. We get a credit rating. We go out and we sell your debt. There may be someone in New York that buys it, someone in San Francisco, someone in Dallas, someone in Bastrop. So that's fine. It's not a bad way to sell debt, but there are a couple of things if we do a private placement that actually has some benefits over an open market sale. So one, if we do a private placement, typically what we're looking to do is sell to local or regional or national banks. And those banks are not as credit conscious, so they don't require a credit rating. They also don't require an offering document. So it has the dual benefit of it doesn't take as long to do a private placement, and it's also a little bit more cost effective. It's not as costly as far as cost of issuance to do a private placement. The other thing is banks typically do not require certain covenants that a bond investor, a typical bond investor would. For instance, a debt service reserve fund. So what they may say is, okay, we're going to go ahead and take your credit, but we're not going to make you fund a debt service reserve fund. And all a debt service reserve fund is typically money that whenever you sell bonds, you have to set aside, and you set aside for the full term of the bonds. So let's say that you do a 15-year bond issuance, then you've got this pot of money that's sitting over here for 15 years that's there in case you need it to make your debt service payments because, say, sales tax revenues go down. So again, not necessarily a bad thing, but the problem is you have, again, money setting aside that right now is not earning a whole lot on top of it. So that's, again, one thing that we're able to avoid by doing the private placement. And again, that last bullet point, one of the things that's nice is it encourages and hopefully helps local area banks to participate. There's no guarantee that a local bank would win, but again, it at least gives them the opportunity to reinvest back in the community if they choose to do so. So we put these bonds out.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Question. What about the interest rates on private versus public?
The interest rates are pretty comparable. And what we've seen is really the banks have been aggressive enough that they've more or less been on top of an open market sale. And that last bullet point there, as you can see there, the bank meeting all the terms and providing the lowest interest rate is the winning bidder. So it's also nice too, where in theory, if we have 5, 6, 7, 8 banks, again, the bank that meets all the parameters that we put forth in our term sheet gives us the lowest interest cost, which obviously means the lowest cost to you wins that, subject, again, to your approval. So what I did is Sean talked about, again, going back to the 1.2 and the 3 million. This is just a very general slide to kind of help you as the board kind of have a mental picture, if you will, of what the financing would look like. So what I did is took 3 terms, as you can see there on the left-hand side, so a 10-year term to a 15 to a 20-year term. Really, if you start getting outside that 20 years, banks, their appetite generally ends at about 20 years, notwithstanding the fact that you may not even want to finance that long to begin with. But again, this goes 10, 15, 20-year terms, and then there's two metrics that I provided. As you can see there, the average annual debt service and then the total debt service. So just as a very quick example, as you can see there, if you did a 10-year note for $1.2 million, you're looking at average annual debt service of about $150,000. And then that bottom number there would be your $1.2 million in principal, plus the interest component. So you'd wind up paying back over those 10 years, roughly $1.5 million. So again, 10 through 20, and then 1.2 all the way over to $3 million. Now, the one thing that I would point out, obviously these rates are preliminary. So the rates will be what the rates are at the time that we go out and bid them from the banks. So that could change. The other thing that I would say too is that the numbers there are based off of level annual debt service. In other words, the payments are basically the same every single year. The board, in going through, as Sean talked about, between now and March, one, as you're deciding on the amount that you want to finance, two, on the term, may decide, you know what, we need a little bit more cushion in a couple of years up front. Maybe you backload principal just for 1 or 2 years or something like that. So that could alter that a little bit, but I just wanted to, again, give you an idea of what that would look like. The other thing that you could also do
Another
is...
question.
Yes, sir.
Is the interest rate fixed for the term?
The interest rate would be fixed, yes, sir. So what we would ask for in the bid specs is a fixed rate, so no interest rate reset.
Are there generally prepayment penalties or anything like that? Is this?
Typically not, and that's actually another thing, what I should have put on the private placement too, one of the pros is the banks typically will allow you a much shorter call. Usually if we go out, if we do an open market sale like I talked about, 10 years is pretty much the standard. Banks generally will go as short as 1 year, maybe to 2 to 3 years, but there is not a penalty for paying those off early. Other questions related to?
Just one more.
Yes, sir.
There was a memo that came out on the interest rates going up because of the tax law.
Yes, sir.
What have you seen, the impact of that?
What we've seen, some of the banks are, quite frankly, still trying to catch up with that, and we've seen them altering their formulas somewhat. However, I would say that the private placements that I've done and that I've had partners that have done, by and large, again, have been on top of the open market. Having said that, we've seen rates go up from the beginning of the year. The Fed is predicted to increase the Fed funds rate probably 3 times this year. I think March, which is already priced in, June and December, if memory serves. There is a general sense, given what's going on in the general economy, given that there seems to be signs of inflation, that we are going to start seeing somewhat of an upward trend in interest rates. Just quickly, the other thing that we can do too is almost kind of a little bit of a hybrid, which says, okay, in between that 1.2 million, in between the 3 million, if we look at debt capacity and say, okay, we want to target our annual debt service at basically $200,000. What this shows again, 10, 15, 20-year terms. The top is the only thing that's changed, which would just show you the par amount that you could issue, and then again, I had that total debt service. So once again, you say, okay, $200,000 is what we want to target over 10 years, then that would translate into roughly about $1.675 million worth of sales tax bonds. So that is, again, the debt capacity and the preliminary numbers. Now, if you as a board decide to move forward, and again, we'd be looking for direction in your March meeting, a couple of things that I would need from the board is a decision on the dollar amount, so how much you would want to finance, a decision on the repayment term, because again, those are items that we'll have to give to the banks in order for them to give us a bid. We'll distribute that term sheet soliciting the bids. As you can see there, what I typically like to do is give banks at least 3 weeks. I want to make sure that they have all the information they're going to want to go through, look at your audit, look at things of that nature. And so I like to give them at least 3 weeks between when we put that term sheet out and when we ask for a response back. So we'll get those bids in, we'll rank those, and then the bids will be reported to the board. As Sean said, that would most likely be, assuming you want to move forward, in April. And at that time, much like whenever you enter into a home mortgage, you know how much you're paying for your house, how much your payments are, what your interest rate is. You'll know all that at the meeting in April. So what I would do is I would come to the board And as you can see there, final par amount, interest rate, and debt service is set. That is, again, all subject to your approval. So corporation would have to approve that. Your city council would also have to approve that as a debt issuance of the EDC. After that, assuming you approved it, we have all the legal documents. We send that to the Texas Attorney General's office. They review the public debt issuances in the state of Texas, and so the corporation would have funds in the bank roughly 30 to 35 days after your approval. So that is, or are the steps in the process. Questions about that?
I have a question. The
Yes, ma'am.
200,000, and I appreciate that you picked a number, but it really is just a picked number. Is that correct? We have no legal obligation that it be 200K? It's
Correct. It
just
is
kind
not
of
a
a
legal
historical, that's sort of what we've tried to do, but there's no obligation that it's only 200K.
Looking at capacity within the debt service schedule that you have in your packet, that 200,000 number is probably the maximum number that I would be comfortable recommending to the board adding to based on our cash flows and where we're going over the next couple of years. It could be any number that the board could say, no, we want to go higher, we want to go lower, but based on what I know about our books and our cash flow, it's a number that I gave Jason based on historical numbers of what we've had debt service-wise on PRs and interest payments, and also knowing where our cash flow is going in the future, something I was comfortable with.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I knew where it came from. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Just in summary, if there's not any other questions, one thing I would say just very quickly, again, what my role is financial advisor. And so I would be helping the corporation. I work on your behalf. I have a fiduciary responsibility to you. So I'd be putting together the finance plan, facilitating the debt issuance all the way through the closing and even after. Ms. Savant's with Norton Rose Fulbright as bond counsel, and what she's looking to do, we're going to ask three main things from her. One, she's going to make sure that we adhere to state law, which is always good. She's also going to make sure that we adhere to federal tax law. These would be, since it's for infrastructure, since it serves a general purpose, public purpose, then these would be tax-exempt securities. So she's making sure that we adhere to, again, federal tax law. And then she's going to be the one that is working on legal documents and interfacing with the Attorney General's office as well. So just wanted to give a little bit of history. And if I didn't steal Kristen's thunder, if you'd like to come up and say anything.
Good evening. It's such a pleasure to be here and to meet all of you. I guess what I would just add to what Jason mentioned was, no matter the manner of sale, whether you do it open market or negotiated or private placement, the purchasers are looking to an independent law firm to give an opinion as to the validity and enforceability of the obligation, and then again, the tax exempt status of the obligation. So that's why we're involved in the transaction, to be able to render that opinion to the purchasers. Norton Rose Fulbright are consistently ranked in the top 10 in the nation, so our opinions are always accepted. But the main message I wanted to give to you is we're here as your counselors, so it's not just on a transaction basis. I mean, most of my day is spent with clients on post-issuance questions or questions that never develop into financings. I mean, we're here to serve you continuously, and again, not just on a transaction basis. So we very much appreciate this opportunity, and I'd be happy to answer any questions as you look forward to this next financing or just in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on 3.4?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in.
Really great. Jason, you and Kristen both, thank you.
All right, 3.5.
Oh, hold on, I've got some slides.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. Yes,
Just to
you
make
said
sure that
that.
everybody's on the same page. So we're looking at the 1.2 million for the Agnes extension as part of the Seton project. The 1.8 million is part of the technology drive, water as well as wastewater, as well as detention as defined in those resolutions that were passed last year. You should have also gotten copies of the updated debt service schedule. I did this on the 21st. We have 2018 principal and interest budgeted for this year, but I've removed it from this sheet because we don't know what the debt issuance is going to be at the moment. So what this shows the board, and it actually goes to the left many years and it goes to the right many years, out to 33 where our longest debt issuance is. And so currently, our longest debt issuance is the 13 that goes out to 33. The 2010 goes out to 22. That was refunded, and so you see down here on the 2017 goes out to 29 with the refunding where we've got interest-only payments out till 22. And then you see the 2006 bond issuance that is paid off in FY 2020 here. We do have a small note at First National Bank that is close to being paid off, and so finance makes that payment every year, and we budget a little bit of dollars for that. As you can see, it was 46 last year. So how we got to that 200 number, which is a good question, is we're currently at about 15% of sales tax revenue for debt service. And when you back up historically and you look at 500,000, another 200,000 added to 300 gets us to 507, which on 2.2 million in revenue gets us to about 25%, which I think is right now is a healthy number. Because that takes us to the next chart, which is the sales tax rebates, and I updated this on the 26th to include
Sean, back on the other chart.
Yes, sir.
As I recollect, there's some unused funds still?
We do. We have 400,000 in the 13, approximately 400,000 in the 13 from the technology extension to the south for Jamco, which those funds have been allocated to the technology project, so we don't need the full 3 million. That 2.6 number he shows, it just happens to be that it works and gets us to a combination of the 13 funds as well as the 2.6 on the 200,000 gets us to $3 million.
And what does the 24.2% mean?
So back prior to the city publishing the bond book that you got in your packet, it has all of the aggregated debt and all of the debt issuances. We got it in this huge spreadsheet in which it was all the debt issuance, and I had to go through the percentage of each debt of what our share was, and that is the percentage of our share of that debt. And there's lines hidden there that prior to that book being published, I actually had to calculate all of that out through all of the years of the debt service. So the total debt for the city is somewhere in that spreadsheet with our percentage dropping into our lines.
Will we always do bonds with them, or is it better if they do theirs and we do ours?
Jason can correct me on this if I'm wrong, and so can Linda. Us issuing debt in the city's names affects the city's lending capacity. Us using our sales tax as the pledge against the debt issuance does not affect their ability to, their debt capacity limit based on their revenue.
So, okay, so I think you answered my question. My idea would be then that what Jason described, particularly if we do the private and where it's our sales tax, then we're not messing with the city's debt deal at all. And isn't that desirable moving forward and not having these and calculating all that? That was my, isn't it better to keep things separate?
Yeah,
okay.
we no longer would affect the city's debt capacity by issuing our debt in our own name and using sales tax as the guarantee for it.
I know I'm making Sam's accounting body hurt with my layman terms, but it just seems like it's better if we stand on our own and we make our own decisions based on the money that we have access to and don't.
Correct.
And that's why we recommended a separate audit next year. Wanted to follow on that question though, on the audit. Will that impact our interest rate that we don't have an audit?
Well, we have an audit as a component unit of the city. What we don't have is the
standalone. We don't have a standalone.
We don't have a standalone audit. That is correct. And it probably, and Jason can answer that, we have a component unit audit, we don't have a freestanding.
Right, I don't think that that'll be a problem. We will probably have some questions from some banks just wanting kind of more information. And actually, usually what we do is whenever we send out that information, we'll send out 3 years worth of audits. In this case, the city's audits, which have you as a discreetly presented component unit.
You would agree that having an audit in the future would be helpful for the EDC if we're going to continue to do?
I think it would be helpful because if we go out along this path and we're doing private placements, it'll make that information a lot easier for banks to digest. So I think that would be helpful.
This is also why I'm not going to be the placement agent for a private placement, because I would get all of those questions and have to answer them. We're going to hire one.
We're kind of glad you're not either, Sean, honestly.
I can tell you I've done it once in a lifetime is enough.
Well, and I'll share with the board that Hilltop is very well respected in the field. And Sam, I don't know if you've
talked about it or not, but when I visit with other folks, like in the TML world, Hilltop always comes up, and they know what they're doing, and there's no point in us making mistakes. I think we should use them.
I've known Hilltop for 28 years. Jason Hughes worked with me in Duncanville and fixed a huge issue we had in the water fund. As far as I'm concerned, they're top shelf and as good as you can get.
Yeah, my experience.
No pressure there, Jason.
And the other thing that I will say is one of the reasons we ask for the 10, 15, and 20-year presentation is that 20-year debt issuance in 18 or 19, and take your pick which year it starts in, puts us out to about 39 or 40. And when you look at these expiration dates of where we're at, it kind of helps us stack our debt. So every 3, 4, 5 years, we've got debt expiring. And as debt expires, and when you look at the length that it takes to put one of these projects together, as we put these projects to bed over the next 12, 18 months, we can then start the pre-planning for the next round, and by the time we get there, we'll have something that else is expiring.
The way it looks is you wouldn't be able to do any more debt until 2022, and it'll be a very small one.
Correct. And that's a 2022, 2023. But what also with sales tax rebates out there, and I think this is important, is I look at this as that unrecognized revenue. We're looking at 2020 right now is where I'm projecting Buc-ee's that agreement to pay out, and then 2022 for Burleson Crossing based on their historical sales and the growth in those sales. And I think those are going to be more organic unless they add some additional stores on the few sites that they have available in there, which that's about somewhere out in there is about the time that, we'll have some debt capacity, and depending upon what other sales tax rebates we do, we're going to free up some what I would consider unrecognized revenue out 3 or 4 years from now.
But if you look at let's just go in your example, 2017, 18, $354,000, that would only increase your debt capacity by 25% of that number on a payment basis, right?
No, that would be...
That's money that's going to be coming into the coffers and staying in the coffers.
Correct. And so it would be, so when we get out here to 2023, we'd have another $360,000 total. In 2021, there'd be about $100,000 total new cash flow that's available.
But you'd only want to have debt of 25% of that.
Potentially, though. These two you kind of lump these together because these are non-operational. I don't expect operational expenses to go up exponentially. I expect them to organically grow with the cost of goods and services. And so this money, when it becomes available, could all go to debt service. It could go to other sales tax rebates for another project, which we hope is unrecognized revenue and it's not cutting into cash flow. It could also go into primary job recruitment as well. And so that's a decision to be made when you get there. It's new free cash flow, and all of it will be recognized. How you allocate it, our debt capacity may go from 25% where I'm comfortable today to 35% because of guidance provided to the board, which frees up all of it or some of it based on what's going on there.
Okay, and also, so right now, the 15% number you gave us for our debt service.
Correct.
Is with that $350K backed out of our revenue, is that correct?
Yeah, it's based on 2.2 million total sales tax revenue.
Okay, so the $350K is in there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's where the additional potential capacity could come from, or one place it could come from?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I always base it on percentage of sales tax, not other revenues coming in. Just to be consistent, when you see these kind of percentages from me, it's my sales tax projections. Obviously it's set with the budget for this year, but in future years, it's what do I think organically our growth is going to be, being very conservative because I'd rather be low on sales tax and it come in higher. So does that answer all your questions? I just wanted y'all to have a chance to meet Jason. I wanted you to have an opportunity to meet Kristen, understand kind of where we started on this 6 months ago, and that we're to the point now that these projects are going to be 60-70% engineering plans, and we're going to need to be looking at completing the debt issuance in the next 60-90 days.
Thank you. All right, moving on to 3.5, update from the ad hoc board committee concerning the clarification of responsibilities, policies, and procedures to include the ED's employment agreement. Kathy?
So just to refresh your memory, the board committee that has been appointed to work on this particular task is made up of Cam and Ron and myself. So the board committee was tasked with clarifying the responsibilities and the procedures and policies, including the director's employment agreement. And we are in the process of reviewing and revising and creating a comprehensive set of documents that provide very clear expectations and measurable performance outcomes to the position. The work is significant in that it will provide the foundation for the BEDC to fulfill its mission and to be held accountable in the execution of its duties. The work plan and process takes into consideration the importance of connecting the executive director's job responsibilities with contractual agreements, the appraisal and performance plan, and goal setting to meet the objectives of the strategic plan in accordance with the BEDC Articles of Incorporation, adopted bylaws, and policies and procedures. The committee, while examining each component independently, is paying special attention to how each component is interrelated so that consistent and diligent oversight will provide focus and clarity moving forward. And with the input from the council, or from council this evening, we anticipate completing the process in the next month to submit for final review by council.
And by the board, right? Council doesn't need to approve that, is that?
I think she meant the board.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify that, right?
And by council, by legal counsel.
Legal counsel, okay, yeah, okay, not city council.
Yeah. The thing about English, you know, those words look the same.
Yeah. All right. Did anybody else have any comments or questions?
I just really appreciate you guys working on it. It is a big amount of work, and I think, quite frankly, for the public, I think for some of us on the board, we were surprised the lack of some of those documents. So it's going to be really nice to have them in place. I think it's beneficial for this board, I think it's beneficial for the public, and I think it's beneficial for both the executive director and our legal counsel. So I really think it's going to help all of us all the way around, and I know it takes extra time and effort. I know you guys have put a lot of time in, and I just personally want to thank you for the effort.
Well, and I just personally want to thank Catherine for taking the lead on a lot of this stuff, and Catherine and I have been working real well together on getting this stuff together. So thank you.
And thank y'all again for volunteering for that. That was a big ask. All right, 3.6, presentation and update on the EDC's Education and Workforce Development Program, Youth Career Day, Continuing Education Center, and Technical Education. Small Business Revolution by Deluxe, 2018 launch, Entertainment Experience Evolution Conference, MDM Plastic West Conference, South by Southwest Interactive Trade Show, Best Economic Development Group, and Coffee Chat.
So Jean's going to take the first one. As y'all know, she does education and workforce development for us. Youth Career Day is coming up, and then we've had some real good conversations with the school district and workforce solutions related to career technical education, career continuing education. So Jean's going to take the first one.
Thank you. We do have our 2018 Youth Career Day that is creeping up on us quickly, April 20th, and it will be at the Performing Arts Center again this year. We're changing it up a little bit. We're going to have sophomores and juniors this year instead of juniors and seniors, and we're hoping that that will allow us to kind of, now that all of the students are all within an actual career path, we can actually start developing those relationships with some of our industry leaders and help us develop not only potential new internship opportunities, but also mentorship opportunities, as well as directing our kids to work and live within our community, which is the ultimate plan with this. We are very excited. We have a motivational speaker that is a part of the Future Farmers of America. He is actually the first Hispanic president of the FFA, and he is coming to speak with the kids not only about where he is today, but where he started, which is a very, very tough life. He had no parents and lived in a boys' home and really worked hard to develop himself into the leader that he is today. And so he's going to come and share that with the students. And then in regards to the workforce higher education aspect, we have been working with BISD as well as the Rural Texas Workforce Solutions here in Bastrop to help identify things that the school district is actually already offering through their After the Bell program that we can maybe link together with the Workforce Solutions. Since BISD has facilities and opportunities already there, we're identifying kind of where some gaps are to help bring those two together, as well as hopefully supplement to develop some actual skilled workforce training programs. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, both of those are very important programs that we're running. Continuing education, career and technical education. We're in the service territory, as y'all know, for Austin Community College, but we're an out-of-school district campus, and so it creates some challenges for us. And the interim school superintendent and his team have really come to the table offering facilities and participation and being able to expand not only the youth programs that they're offered through After the Bell, but also looking at adult programs that could be available to high demand skills training. And the Workforce Solutions Board through them, and also the Texas Workforce Commission, there's also training dollars out there that, down the road we hope to be able to put together programs that we're able to tap some of those training dollars for high demand skill sets, maybe some consortium of businesses that needs very specific training. That whole area is really opened up with the interim school superintendent coming to the table and really being a partner in this. And so we're real happy to be able to provide that update to the board. The Small Business Revolution.
One quick question.
Yes, sir.
For Gene, how are they getting the homeschool kids involved in this? Or are they?
Currently, right now, we don't have that connectivity through the school district. However, if we can start developing some of the after hours programs, then that is something that we can do. I believe right now the library works very closely to provide some opportunities.
So are homeschool kids invited to this event on
It will be
April
open
20th?
to anyone.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it'll be open to the public, and not only students, but also adults.
So Small Business Revolution by Deluxe, if you haven't heard about that, I'm not real sure what rock you're living under, but and if you haven't heard about it, the mayor would like to visit with you outside. So the announcement party is from 2 to 3 tomorrow at the Bastrop Opera House. I am very thankful that it's a 10 a.m. council meeting tomorrow, which means my Tuesday evening is free. And so that is tomorrow. We find out we were into second place going into the close of voting, and we find out tomorrow if we were able to make that leap to first.
We find out that we win tomorrow.
Correct. And as the city manager and mayor will tell you both, is we've already won on this. The activity that we see and the camaraderie that we see and the growth that we see in some of our business leaders in the skills that they've developed from having to go through this process, we've already won. And so we're real excited about it. We were glad to support the effort and put the EDC and what we had to offer on the table for that effort. 2018 launch, unfortunately, was a casualty of this. It was scheduled for tomorrow. In all of the discussions related to it, because it was going to run from 9:30 to 3:30, the council meeting moving to 10 a.m. and we really think that navigating city regulations is going to be a very popular session. We were just fearful that we were going to lose some of our speakers and some of our attendees tomorrow. And so that was moved to March 20th, Tuesday, March 20th. Alicia Cook is still going to keynote that with 8 secrets from a secret shopper. So if y'all remember last year, We secret shopped with Main Street, the city, the EDC, Main Street businesses, and so she's coming back to talk about her 8 secrets from a secret shopper. She previewed that a couple months ago in Georgetown, and I hear it was fantastic. And so we're real excited that Alicia is coming to do that. We had 42 registrants for yet tomorrow, but we've added 5 more with the date move, so we're up to 47. And if you need sign language, we have some folks that require sign language services, and so we have arranged for sign language interpreters that day. So if you know anybody that needs a sign language interpreter and wants to open a small business, this is the place to be, because we're already funding the sign language interpreters, and we're glad to do it. Angela worked really hard to be able to find us a company that can provide those and allow us to meet the law. So that is March 20th. Entertainment Experience Evolution Conference, the mayor and city manager and myself went out to Santa Monica to this. It's a conference really built around what we call and what the industry calls experiential development. It's now when you go out, and it's not just going to the movie theater for an experience. It's not just going to a theme park for an experience. It's going to any shopping center out there and having what they refer to as attractors, or things that attract people into the shopping center. And I think one of my favorite examples that somebody used, and I believe it was in New Jersey, they had a mall on a pier, and nobody would walk to the end of the mall of the pier because there was nothing down there. And they went and built this fountain with music and lights and a show putting on with this fountain, and people all of a sudden wanted to walk all the way to the end to go see this fountain at the end of the pier. And then their quick service businesses where you can buy candy or a Coke or wanted to be there because people were coming every half hour, every hour to watch the show at the end of the pier. And so don't think of experiential retail as just a theme park, or think of it as a movie theater. It can be restaurants that have a common playground or a common area, the greens in Houston, where the kids go play on the AstroTurf grass, and you're sitting around at the restaurants watching them play, and you're attracted to that, where they've got yoga in the park. I had the opportunity to sit through a session with the landscape architect for the Grove in LA, and they talked about the trolley and how the people come there just to go ride the trolley. It changed my opinion on pay for parking and why you charge for parking. We won't get into that tonight, or that's not a conversation I want to be involved in Bastrop, but I now understand why you pay for parking in certain places. Is that's revenue that the development's bringing in to put on a free music show, or it's revenue that the development's bringing in to put on a Christmas event. And it's, yes, they make some money on it, but it's revenue to help offset. And if you're shopping there and spending money, your parking's comped and it's free, it's validated. And so it's those folks that are just coming for the attractor that are help offsetting the cost related to those events and amenities that are being used. And so I think it was a great conference. The mayor may have something else to add, but I think we learned a lot about where that whole industry is going.
Yeah, it was, well, I don't even think we were there 36 hours. It was a whirlwind trip, but it was fantastic, just real experts in their field. A couple of takeaways, and I know the city manager shared it at the council meeting, so I'll spare you guys the time, but the evolution of retail businesses, and that, you know, the big boxes are dead and Amazon's going to put every business out. It's another change, just like plate glass window is how window shopping came into being. Retail has to respond to the changes, and the latest one just happens to be online shopping. But you still want to have an experience. The other thing, and I can pick on millennials because I've gave birth to 2 of them, they want to spend all of their money, so we might as well give them a place to spend it, because they don't save their money, and if they're going to spend it, they might as well spend it in Bastrop and let their sales tax help us benefit the whole community. And they're looking for, you know, they want to put a selfie, they want to take a picture where it's either a, gee, me and my best friend Sean are at this place, all the way to the nanny, I'm here and you're not. But they're looking for something that is uniquely, no one else could get this picture unless you were with me at this time. So it was just a very interesting way to look at attracting people and keeping people downtown, because when they do that, I think the key was 3 hours.
Yeah.
Once somebody spends 3 hours, they want to eat, they want to drink, and they want to go to the bathroom. And if they have to leave to do any of those things, they are not coming back. But if they can do that, and if they've gotten something to eat, well, now the kids have settled down, I'm feeling pretty good, I've got my second win, let me go shopping some more. So it was just, I think we all took tons and tons of notes. It was very, very beneficial, and
Yeah, extending your
going.
dwell time, they talked a lot about that, and how long you're in the shopping district that you're at. I mean, and the mayor is correct. It was a great conference. I think we all took away so many valuable things that you wouldn't learn otherwise. Gene is going to come up and talk about MD&M Plastic West that was also going on at the same time in Anaheim.
Yes, we were all in California at the exact same time, about an hour and a half from each other, and never saw each other. MDM is the largest medical device manufacturing conference in the United States. Over 2,000 vendors from all across the globe. Everything from your wires to your plastic components to packaging, whatever. Mainly focused on the medical industry or the bio-life science industry. However, I see a lot of those same vendors at many of our other shows. And so just continuing to build those relationships with companies, suppliers, those types of companies that would fit within what our strategic plan focuses on recruiting. Also had the opportunity to meet site location brokers, through our partnership with Site Location Partnerships. They put together a great meet and greet every year in Anaheim with the LA brokers that focus on bringing those types of companies to Texas. And so a little more one-on-one, very intimate setting, not a whole lot of people. And so it's great to continue to build those relationships with our co-parts in the LA area.
Yeah, and through all of this, we're really trying to open the board up to what we're doing marketing-wise so that you know. That's why we're going through this kind of session. The next one that is coming up for us, and I don't have a slide for it, is South by Southwest Interactive. And so for the second year in a row, we're partnering with Bastrop County, Bastrop, Elgin, and Smithville is what we call the best economic development group, and have a booth at South by Southwest Interactive. And that is really, there's a huge cohort of technology guys that are coming and going from that Bastrop could be a fit for them, as well as it supports our tourism industry and what's going on in Bastrop. And hey, why don't you come an extra day or stay an extra day next year? Come stay at the Hyatt versus staying downtown. It gives us that so much flexibility. We had a good show last year. We're expecting a good show this year. Angela has been working on our new booth that we are partnering with everybody involved in. It's never as easy as it sounds. It's kind of like wrangling cats when you've got 4 different governmental entities providing input into how that thing goes together. But we are real close. If you haven't been to our office or been to the visitor center during last First Friday Art Walk, we bought a new multimedia television that plays looped video that we will be taking down there to be playing videos of Bastrop and Bastrop County and in the city of Bastrop and the EDC. So we're real excited about it. It's coming up in a couple of weeks. Last but not least, March 9th, it's the end of the first quarter, coffee chat at 7:30 in the morning. So excuse me, just a time to come and ask questions, have coffee with the EDC and Main Street program, and meet some new folks. And these are very well attended. We'll have 20 to 30 folks there every time, and the first one is March 9th for this year.
And just a reminder on that one, board members, if you want to go, make sure you let the office know so we can avoid a quorum.
Yeah.
Because you brought that up, I'll let the board, because I normally go to the coffee chats. I'll be in San Antonio at a TML conference, so I will not be there. So don't not go because you think I'm going. I won't be there.
All right, item 4.1, Bastrop EDC will meet in closed executive session pursuant to the Code, Chapter 551, to discuss the following. Section 551.072, deliberation about the purchases, sale, exchange, lease, or value of real property, Project Revolution. 2, Section 551.087, deliberation regarding economic development negotiations, Project CNSA and/or Pecan Park Commercial. Section 551.074, personnel matters, and Section 551.071, attorney-client consultation. Personnel matters, review of responsibilities of executive director, and discussion regarding employment agreement. All right, it's 8:16. Bastrop EDC Board of Directors will reconvene into open session to discuss, consider, and/or take any action necessary related to the executive session noted herein. There will be no action, so
Motion to adjourn.
all in favor? Aye. We are adjourned at 8:16 also.